With me today is Carletta Washington. She is pursuing her doctoral degree at the University of Missouri in education. She is also the founder and CEO of Education for All Incorporated, a nonprofit community outreach organization. And she is here today to talk about her book, Education Reform, the Role and Responsibility of Schools, Parents, Students, and Communities. Obviously, education is your interest, but
Yes.
what prompted you to write this book?
Just as an educator, I saw so much negativity around me in terms of sometimes colleagues were disappointed with the way things were working out with some of their students. So colleagues tended to blame parents, parents tended to blame us, politicians tended to blame the educational system and the community. But then also I noticed that while we wanted all those other groups to step up to the plate more or less, it seems like we were starting to expect less of the students, you know, their role in terms of them being more responsible because it is their education after all. And so I just want to also say that there are some positive things going on in education because I saw a lot of it, and I figured if I'm staying in education, I want to focus on the positive instead of the negative.
Right. Now, did you have a particular audience in mind when you wrote the book?
It's actually for everyone. Students, I would say more so third, fourth grade on up through college because there are sections about respecting themselves and their peers. Parents, those who are expecting or even thinking about becoming parents, because I also talk about how to choose a daycare in the book. And then as far as educators, no matter what their role is, whether they're an administrator, a counselor, teacher, it doesn't matter. There's still something in there for them. And then community members, anyone who's in a community that's near a school, you know, just them supporting the school. So that's my basic span for the book. It's more also to give you a comprehensive view of education. If you really want to understand it and how we can fit those pieces together, then that's the book for you.
Well, I can remember many, many times hearing people say, I'm not going to vote for that tax increase for the school. My kids have already graduated.
Right.
And I'm thinking, you don't want the store clerk to know how to add and subtract money.
Right. Yeah.
So it is, and I'm glad that you stressed this, and it is a community involvement.
It is.
You should be interested and concerned long after your children have graduated from the system.
Plus, if we don't keep the school up, you know, schools are funded by taxes, then your property value goes down. So for the people who make the comments like you said, which I've heard myself, you know, I just ask them, do you want your property value to go down? Because one day either you or your children will be trying to sell that house.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's. Now, did you do a lot of research, or did this just come out of all of the experience that you've had?
It's really based on experience, and I would say experience is research as well, more hands-on, and it was also part of venting as well, just trying to get some things. I just started typing, and then after a while I said, okay, now let me go back and see how I can tone it down so that it's professional and I'm not ticking anybody off as they read it.
Right. Now, how would you suggest that, say, a student use this book?
I think as encouragement, when I give presentations at schools that I've been at over the last few years, I actually refer to the chapters in the books that are, the book rather, that is for the students. And I take each of those chapters as teaching points, and I try to make it a real world example. I know a lot of times students can get discouraged about school, and especially when we talk about high school sophomores and juniors, that's that drop-off point where once you hit 16, you really don't have to be in school. So what can we do to motivate them to keep going because senior year seems so far away. So I just try to stress with them the respecting themselves and their peers, because it's really about character building for them at that moment and trying to figure out what they want to do after they graduate.
Well, I can remember it was sometime, I think, before the Civil War when my son was in school. But I was working, and I think that presents a particular problem for parents in just communicating with the school. I mean, how do you get to a parent-teacher conference and that sort of thing? Are there some tips about that in the book?
I list a few things in there. Mainly, and I was talking to a young lady today a few minutes ago, mainly schools, we have to find a different way of working with parents. there's a lot of technology out there, and I always have asked my parents, you know, what's the best way to get in contact with you? Do you have access to the internet? Do you have email? Do you have a fax machine? Is voicemail best for you? Is a weekly note or a weekly folder best for you? And then I let the parent figure it out because they know their situation. And I recall a situation once with a student, a high school freshman, and his mom had access to email. So she was at work, or if she happened to be at home, as soon as he came in my class, she knew his schedule. So she knew once he came in my class, I would email her. He made it on time. He did turn in his homework, because my students always had first 10 minutes of class to do a journal assignment, and then a reading assignment as an English class. And then the last 5 minutes was kind of a wrap-up time. And so there was a little time for me to get a quick moment to email her saying everything went fine. So that worked really well with that parent. And then I've also had an open door policy. Come up anytime, call anytime, and my students knew how to behave if I stopped for a moment to talk to a parent. And parents also knew that if it just wasn't a good time, then I would let them know, stay as long as you like, or I'll talk to you for 1 or 2 seconds, but then I really have to go back to class. So because of that relationship, that helped a lot. And I think we have to do more of that in schools. Just be open, because parents, they do respect you more when they know I can come up anytime, or this teacher will call, they'll email, they'll do whatever it takes for my schedule. So we really have to accommodate parents.
Well, and I think what you're also talking about here is that a lot of parents may only remember the bad parts of going to school. And I think they have to step back a little bit and say, I have to be engaged if my kids are going to learn.
And that's why I say any way that works for you as the parent, because then it gets creative and it really stretches. Because if you really want to get involved, then what works for you, you know, and that's where you're almost calling the parents' bluff. But, you know, but it challenges that parent to stretch, because as a school, I need to stretch, but then I also need you to stretch as well. So if you can't make a conference, if you can't do this, this, or that, what is it that you can do? Because I need you to help me with your child.
Right. So now, do you have some tips in here for parents on how, if they want to get that involved and the school seems resistant, are there things that a parent can do to approach the whole school about, I really want to know more about what's going on?
I go into it a little bit, but then I also focus on, well, mostly with the parents, being forthright with the school, you know, this is what's happening. So then that way and keeping the lines of communication open, that way the school is aware of what's happening. And they can also help you with your child. I would tell parents, let me know, you know, I said, our issues as parents and adults become our kids' issues. And I said, you may think your child is fine, or you may tell them grow up, but when they leave your house or your presence, then they're acting out. They're taking it on somehow when they get into the school building. And I would also tell my parents, you know, let me know if you had a death in the family, if you had a new birth. That way I can handle the situation differently instead of, you know, just I either yelled at the kid or I gave them a suspension or whatever. Let me know, and then I can handle it a little differently for what works with your child. And when I use that language, then parents were more receptive, because they knew I want to help your child, because that's who you're concerned about. You're not really concerned about everybody else's. But it's just getting parents to keep that communication open with every single person that has contact with your child, because you can tell the school office, but the teacher might not get that information. And I have parents saying that as well, you know, well, I told the school, I told the counselor, but you didn't tell the teacher, you know, so you have to tell every person. And then also, finally, I put the burden also on the educators, you know, to find out, you know, make frequent calls to find out what's going on, or if you see a change, or things were going fine, and then all of a sudden there was 1 or 2 days that just didn't seem right, you know, think about what's going on here with the student, actually make contact with parents.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Carletta Washington has been here talking about her book, Education Reform. You can find it at your library and your favorite bookstore.